can start. It's exactly 3 p.m. right now. Start right away so we can try to finish on time.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to give a quick shout out. So today we will have a really fun class. Zhaojer, our awesome GSI, will lead this lecture, and we'll be learning about Figma. So Zhaojer will show you a bunch of examples, either the ones that he built on his own, and the other ones previous project teams have built, and there will be a lot of hands-on activities. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Professor. So I'm very honored to be here. So this is my first time being a guest lecturer for EECS 193, and I'll be talking about Figma like Professor said. Yeah. Before we talk about Figma, there are some logistics things I want to point out. So assignment 1 and 2 grades will be released later today. I'll release them as soon as I get home after the lecture. And the regrade request will also be open today, and it will be posted on Piazza. So type Piazza to get the links to the regrade requests. And please submit them by the end of day, Saturday. You have 48 hours to submit them, pretty much, a little over. But yeah, that's pretty much it about.
Just a quick question. This is the first time that I'm listening, from the back. But can people in the back hear okay, or do you prefer having a mic? I prefer okay, maybe try it.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, wait, is this better? Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so that's it about assignment 1 and 2. Project milestone 1 is also due this Sunday, so make sure get started on that if you haven't. Midterm is next Thursday from 6 to 7 p.m. unless you have alternative exams. So make sure reach out to us if you believe there's anything wrong with your alternate exam if you have any. But yeah, make sure you study, prepare for midterm, and get ready. All right, so the two goals for today are basically to learn Figma, and then we also have some hands-on activities spread throughout this lecture, so you can practice learning Figma through activities. So why do we need to learn Figma? For the purpose of this class, we will be using Figma for a lot of the exercise or assignments and project milestones. So specifically, for assignment 4, you'll be using Figma to build a somewhat high-fidelity prototype. But more importantly, for project milestone 3 and 4, you'll be using Figma to basically design and build your own project, your own product. Yeah, so that's why Figma is very important. So please rewatch this lecture if needed, or just search on Google. But anyways, so now we're going to talk about Figma. So just a show of hands. Has anyone used Figma before? Nice. So we do see quite a few people have used Figma before. So that's great. So hopefully today you, I guess, reinforce some of your already existing knowledge about Figma and hopefully learn something new as well. So what is Figma actually? So it is a collaborative web application for UI and UX design. And it is actually also available locally for desktops and mobile devices. You can download them. And why do we want to use Figma? Or what exactly is Figma good for? So it's good for designing user interfaces. So imagine you have an idea of how you want something to look like. You can actually realize your idea by building a prototype in Figma and just designing it and specify how it looks, right? But that's not it about Figma. Figma you can also specify not just how something looks, but how something works in Figma as well, by defining the interactions in Figma. So you can actually build an interactive prototype that user can actually use to a certain degree. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. And you can do them collaboratively. So Figma has really good real-time sharing features. So you can share them with your teammates, and you can work on the same thing together. And lastly, the most important thing is that Figma is free. And everybody loves free stuff. So it's great. So we're going to talk about the very first, so we talked about what Figma is, or a high-level overview of Figma. Now I'm going to show what Figma is capable of when you are just using some of the very fundamental features of Figma. So let me just navigate to this prototype that I built. Let me just make it full screen, sorry. So a little bit context of what this prototype is. So this was a project that I worked on for a class when I was an undergrad here. And the purpose of this, or my product, the ultimate product, was to educate children about internet safety through a hands-on experience or first-hand experience of what a typical scamming looks like. And the scamming that we kind of used, sorry, the incentive that we kind of used was free Robux. So how kids nowadays play Roblox. But anyway, so we first exposed the users, or specifically the children, to a typical scam that we designed right here. And after we scammed them, or hypothetically scammed them, of course, we did not keep any of their personal information. We would then walk through or go through this entire website with the user and point out interactively which part of this website basically indicates that it might be a scam. So the ultimate goal is just to teach them about scams so that they can have experience, so likely they won't be scammed in the future. And as you can see, so when I open up my Figma prototype, so this was a high-fidelity prototype I built, you can see this looks pretty much just like the typical Roblox page with one extra button here, which is called limited time offer. And I guess without getting into too much detail, you can notice how, although this looks like a real Roblox website, the only interaction I can have on this web page so Figma has a really cool feature is that you just click anywhere on the prototype. It will show you, it will highlight which area of the prototype you can actually interact with. And specifically here, the only interactable feature is the limited time offer button. All right, so this thing, I just really want to say something about this, is that although this looks like a real website, it does not have to have all the features of the actual website. So that's the most important thing you have to keep in mind when you're building your own prototype, is that make sure you implement the most important features that are unique to your own prototype, rather than implement every single feature that your final product might possess, right? So the most important feature here for me was this button saying limited time offer. So of course, I just implemented this right here. So I can click on it, right? And as you can see, it takes me to a login page. So this is, of course, so the scam already started right here. So we're going to actually, what a real scam would typically look like would be just, I would store their username and password, or do some man-in-the-middle attack, whatever, but it doesn't really matter. So we scam, or we prompt the user to enter in their username and password, and they can enter them in and click on login to proceed. So once again, you can see that I did not actually have a keyboard show up and ask the user to actually type in something, because again, this is not too much of an importance for the purpose of a high-fidelity prototype. But anyway, so suppose the user has logged in, and they click on login button, and you can see the user will be greeted with this a website that basically explains why we are giving away free Robux, just to reason a bit more and try to trick them. But of course, you can scroll up and down just like a real website does, which is pretty cool, something you can do in Figma. And of course, I'm going to click Test My Luck to actually enter a chance to win free Robux. And this is just a pop-up, and not too much important. I'm just going to skip that. And here's another form that I built, but not too much of important right now. So, and once you click Submit Form, or once the user clicks Submit Form, they will be taken to a chance to win free Robux. And this is just a sketchy website that I designed. Basically, once the user clicks on this middle button right here, the wheel is kind of spinning, and it's going to give them this chance to win free Robux. And you can see the animation actually looks pretty good for a high-fidelity prototype in Figma. So this is not web technology at all. So you can see there's a pop-up that showed up, basically trying to trick them even more to share them with their friends or whatever. But anyway, it's not too much important. And they can get a chance to spin the wheel again. Of course, they're not going to get it. But the last time, or the last shot they have, they actually won 10,000 Robux, which is pretty cool. But of course, like any real scamming website, they never give you the reward. And in fact, we actually decided to try to exploit even more information from the user by asking them to either fill out a form that has their credit card information, or trying to download a potentially malware. But of course, they are, of course, not real. But by clicking on any of them, this pop-up will show up just telling the user that, all right, so you have been scammed. Make sure that you don't do this again. And then the website, our website pretty much just goes through this process one more time with the user and tell them which part of the website actually kind of hints at the fact that the website is not a real, legit website, and it might be a scam. All right. But I'm not going to show that half because it's pretty long. So I'm going to pause right here and switch to the next demo that we have, which is something that is more fit for the context of this class, which we'll get to right now. So here is the prototype I want to show. Let me just full screen one more time. So a little bit of context of this prototype. This was a prototype from EECS 493 fall 2022 by the group, the Underdogs. And they basically built this prototype or this product for helping engineering, undergrad engineering students to connect with alumni. And yeah, that's pretty much it, what this app does. And let's take a look at to see what it can do. So upon opening this prototype, you'll be presented with this kind of sign-up page, of course. And sorry. You can, of course, click anywhere on the page to see what are some interactable elements on this page right now. And again, as you can see, although there are so many buttons on this prototype, only a few of them are actually interactable. So again, make sure you implement the most important features that are unique to your prototype. So I'm just going to click sign up. And as you can see, I'm just signing up with a default email, markgreen@umich.edu. I click continue, and I can select whether I'm a student or not. So I'm going to say I'm a student. Click continue. And all right, the profile already filled out for me, so just assume I'm Mark Green. And then click confirm. And I also can select the year I am in and also the type of job I'm looking for. So I'm a grad student, so I'm going to select that. And I'm looking for all types of jobs that are available, so I'm just going to select all of them. And what is my major? So I'm computer science major, so I'm going to select that as well. So after signing up, you can see that I'm being redirected to the home page where it's someone was already trying to connect with me, some of these alumni. And because I'm a computer science student, I don't want to connect with someone who's into like financial advisor, at least not yet. So I'm going to reject this connection offer. But it's also actually the built-in interaction that is only available here. So I'm going to click reject. But this person, Jessica Parker here, they are software engineer at Google. So because I'm a computer science student, I want to get into Google. I'm going to connect with this alumni. And as you can see here, it shows up a pop-up saying I have successfully connected with this alumni. So there's nothing to do for this page. So we're going to navigate to the chatting page. And as you can see, Jessica, which is the first row messages here, is typing something. So I'm going to click on it. And I can see that it's asking me to schedule a meeting. So I'm saying, great, I will set up one right now. And I will set up a meeting by clicking here and selecting a date and adding a location. Then click confirm. And by doing that, I'm redirected again to a calendar page, which are just listing out all of the appointments I have made so far. And I've only made one, which is with Jessica. And you can see it's right here. All right, so one last feature that I thought was pretty interesting is that they also built in a explore page where they can, where the user can try to discover more connections through this explore page. And you can scroll up and down, which is pretty cool. But only explore option right here is just software engineering. So I'm going to click on that. I'm also going to change the filter to see something that I want, so internships and co-ops. And then click on Amazon, so I want to connect with someone from Amazon. And you can see that there's one remaining alumni at Amazon that I can connect with. So I'm going to click connect, and voila, I have a new connection. So that's pretty much it for this prototype. I guess one important takeaway from both of them is just Figma can achieve a lot, and almost looking just like a real website, which is pretty cool. But you must remember that make sure you implement the most important features in your Figma prototype rather than focusing on small details that might not contribute much. All right. So we took a look of in two very very great demos. And I want to just mention that there are more demos from the fall 22 semesters on Canvas, as long as you just navigate to the page called, you just check Canvas and check this link. All right, so now we're actually going to get started with Figma ourselves. So the remainder of this class will be me just showing some Figma features, and you'll be working on some activities. So please first create an account if you haven't, using your Umish account. So feel free to just sign in with Google when it prompts you by going to the link there. And then after you have signed up for an account, please make a copy of this file. So you can either open this slide on Canvas and click on the link here, or you can use this Yale key link here and just type it into your computer. And yeah. OK, so I'm going to start doing this too. All right. So I'm just going to use this link here because I already have it open. So let me just close this. Oh, sorry. Does everyone have this second thing open? OK, I'll just, cool, nice. So make a copy. So you can make a copy by simply clicking on Open in Figma. But click on this after you have created an account, so like it doesn't just go random places. So of course, I have a Figma account. So after clicking on it, it will just take me to this Figma canvas, or Figma workspace. And you can share this design file you just opened by clicking on the Share button on the top right corner. All right, so this button right here. So you click on Share, and you can share it with your neighbor, or if you want to work alone, feel free to do that too. But I recommend working with someone together. All right, cool. So let's start. Just to make sure everyone is on the track of trying to open something in Figma, trying to open it. All right, so I'm just going to start talking about some Figma basics when you are trying to open this. But anyways, so when you open this Figma canvas, you'll be greeted with this kind of workspace. So I'm going to quickly go over what some of the stuff does. So on the left panel here, so I just want to say, show this. So this on the left is the left panel, and the top panel is the top one, the right panel is the right one. So you don't get confused when I refer to these by left, right. The things in the middle are basically every element you have created so far on this current page in this file. So everything you can see in the middle also are listed on the left panel. Let me just close this. Under the Layers tab, all right? So that basically lists out everything you have created. And that by clicking on the top right corner of the left panel, I open a drop-down menu that opens different pages of this Figma design file. So you can use pages to do many different things. For me, I use pages in this exercise or this activity just to isolate different elements from one another so that you don't get overwhelmed when you first open up and everything is on the same page. It's too messy. But anyways, here are the pages. Here's the layers. And the assets, we'll talk about it in a moment. All right. The top panel, before I talk about that, let me just actually show you how to move around in Figma. So you can choose to use this hand button on the top panel. You can click on it, right? And you can see that your mouse became a hand, and you can drag around to move it, right? Pretty cool. But for me, I like to move around by just using like the scrolling wheel on your mouse or hand gesture on your mouse pad, whatever. You can scroll up and down to move up and down. And you can hold down the Shift key, and then scroll. You can move left and right. So that pretty much covers all directions you can move in. So I just use that way to move around anyways. So that's how you can move around. So now let's just quickly start a new page. So let's not take a look at this here. So I'm just going to start a new page, an empty page, so I can show you some cool stuff. I'm going to call it Basics. All right, just so it has a name. The first 3 things that we are going to learn today about Figma, other than moving around, are these 3 things on the top panel. They are frames, shapes, and text. So a Figma frame, when you click on it, is a way of organizing different elements together. It's almost analogous or identical to what an HTML div tag does. So you know how in HTML, you can nest it a div tag within a div tag? You can basically do all kinds of stuff within div tags. Pretty much, frames are the exact same thing. So you can create a frame within a frame within a frame so that you can organize things in a hierarchical structure, and it's easier to navigate. And usually the top level frame that we're going to see will be the thing you want to design for. So for example, if I'm designing for an iPhone or designing a mobile app, the top level frame will likely be, let's say, you can see some of the built-in frames that I can select from. Can be any of these frames right here. So let me just say I want to design for iPhone 13 and 14. By clicking on it, you can see that I've created a frame. All right. So that's what a Figma frame does. You can create many frames as you want. But right now, I'm just creating this top-level frame right here. All right. So the second thing that we're going to learn about is just shape. So again, shapes are very fundamental things. And I'm just going to do like maybe a square. And I'm going to just click on the square thing and click within the frame. And I have created a square. All right. And that's pretty much it about shapes. Nothing too much to talk about. But I do want to redirect your attention to the right panel. All right. So as you can see, without selecting anything on the page, the right panel has minimal information. Okay? But as soon as I click on any of the element I have created so far, the right panel changes and displays all of the details you can change about this element on the right panel. All right. So that's something I want to talk about. And lastly, you can also enter any piece of text you want. So I'm just going to type in hello world and make this slightly bigger here, just 120 maybe. OK, so maybe that's too much. 30. OK, wait, I think I just messed up. But I'm just going to type again. So I've typed hello world here. And you can see that I now have a frame, a text within the frame, and another shape within the frame. All right. So your first activity is pretty much to do something similar using the three things we have learned so far. You are going to first start a new page so that it doesn't get messy, and create a frame, any frame of your choice. Add any text onto the frame, whatever you like, and add any shape. And then play around with the right panel and see what are some of the features you can change about specific elements. And lastly, click on the Present button, which I forgot to show. Sorry about that. Click on the Present button, which is the top right button right here. All right. And as you can see, as soon as I click on it, it's going to take me to this Figma prototype I just built. All right. Cool. So we'll have about 3 minutes to work on this activity. Please work with your friends or work alone if you want. But try it out and see what you can create with these simple elements. Yeah, feel free to discuss if you want. But yeah. All right, so I guess we can come back to the next activity. So hopefully you've had a chance to play around with it, of course. But if not, feel free to always come back to this after class and play around with it as well. So the next thing we're going to talk about is constraints. So everything we mentioned so far are pretty much the fundamental features of Figma. And now we're going to move to some slightly more advanced stuff. And the first thing we're going to talk about is constraints. So remember I talked about how you can place a frame within another frame, so you can nest frames around. Or you can basically pretty much place different stuff around, all right? But it gets hard when you're trying to organize them by yourself, right? And most importantly, how should a frame adjust its width and height or whatever when its parent frame adjusts their width and height? And now is where constraints come in. So constraints, they define how elements, or specifically a child element, should respond when their parent element or parent frame changes size. And that's pretty much it about frames. And they are great for responsive design. So it just means that making sure that your design does not look terrible on different screen sizes. And yeah. You can also read more about constraints by going to this link here, but don't do it now. There are a lot of text here, but feel free to check them out after class. But let's take a look at what constraint does in Figma. So I'm going to click on the constraints starter page, all right? And I will be presented with this right here. So constraints only apply when you place an element within another element. So I'm going to place this square into this app bar right here. All right? Cool. So you can see after I place the square in, on the right side here, the right panel displays the constraints subsection. Right? So I can modify these constraints here to specify how I want the square to adjust its shapes when its parent, so this app bar here, adjusts their shape. All right? So for example, right now, it's set to scale. All right? So what scale does is simply whenever let me just zoom in a bit. All right? So basically, whenever I adjust the parent's shape, no matter how I adjust it, this square in the middle, all right, or within this app bar, will also adjust correspondingly, or scale up and down correspondingly. So that's pretty much what scale does. Feel free to play around with it on your free time, but yeah. And you might also notice that there are two things. There are two scales here, right? You might think, so what is Figma doing? Why is it a duplicate? So it's not a duplicate. It's in fact something you can specify in Figma that you can separate how this element should adjust horizontally when its parent size changes, and how it should adjust vertically when its parent size changes. So let's take a look at another example, actually. So let me change the constraint of this element to left. All right. So by changing this to left, by definition, it simply is going to have a fixed size to the left border of its parent, regardless of how its parent adjusts its width. So for example, let me just zoom in a bit. And you can see this very dim dotted line pointing to the left border of its parent, just basically indicating that this is a constraint being applied. And no matter how I adjust this left border, it's always going to stay constant. You can see how like this fixed distance between the left border and this element, right? So that's pretty cool. And so let's say now I want to adjust this vertically. And I want to adjust this to, let's say, center. So what adjusting or changing this to center does is that this element is always going to stay or have a fixed distance to the center of this element vertically, regardless of how you adjust this parent element vertically. So for example, let's say I adjust this like this, right? You can see how this element always stays in the middle, or right? So that's what the center does. Cool. So that's pretty much it about constraints, actually. So right now, your activity, or what you are trying to do for activity 2, is actually use the constraint feature we just learned, and then place, let me just quickly explain, place these things on the top, you can see some of the things I've built on top. Place them in the app bar frame, right? And then adjust the constraints correspondingly such that the 3 shapes on the right will always remain a fixed distance to the right border and always stay in the vertical center, whereas the thing on the left and the page title always have a fixed distance to the left border and always stays on the vertical center no matter how you adjust them. And lastly, after you have set up this app bar correctly, place this app bar into the Google Pixel frame such that this app bar will always stay at the top no matter how you adjust it. And also have the same distance to both left and right borders. All right, so feel free to chat with your neighbors and see whether you can figure out how to do this using the things we just learned.
Question.
Yes.
If I make the bar taller, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you want the left thing, the left constraint apply to a group of both of them? Do you want to group them together? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Oh, up to you. Up to you. Great question. Yeah. Yeah, as long as it's constrained to the left, it should be good. Yeah, great question. All right, so hopefully you had a chance to explore this. I'm actually going to show you how I can do it, or I would do it, sorry. Let me just Control Z back to its previous shape. So remember how the right 3 elements must be constrained to the right. So I just select right and center so that it will always have this fixed distance to the right side of the parent border and will always stay in the vertical center no matter how you adjust it. So basically, these 2 elements are going to have the exact same constraints, so I'm going to place them here. So make sure I change them correspondingly. So right and center, and also right and center. Cool, cool. And now I'm going to place the text here. Place both of them in. Sorry, I just messed up. Place this here. And I'm going to change this to left and center. So remember, this is going to have a fixed distance to the left border and always going to have in the vertical center. Right? So after I do this, you can see that no matter how I adjust, sorry. Let me just change this correctly. All right, that should be good. All right, so you can see no matter how I adjust the vertical size of the parent container, it's always going to stay in the vertical center, right? So it's pretty cool. And also, no matter how I adjust the left side, the left 2 elements are going to stay on the left side, and the right 3 elements are going to stay on the right side, right? All right, so now I'm just going to place this into the Google Pixel frame, change the size a bit, and move it up a bit, and change this to left and then right. So remember that the problem specifies we this bar should shrink or change both with respect to the left side and also to the right side. So I'm going to change this to left and right horizontally. And for vertically, I'm going to make this constrained to the top, because no matter how I change the top, it should be roughly the same. So now I can test this by simply selecting the top level frame and adjust this left side. You can see it's looking pretty good. Also adjusting this right side, it's also looking pretty good. I can also adjust the top border, and you can see it adjusts correspondingly as well. All right, cool. Does anyone have any questions so far? Yes. Oh, how did I get the bar to fit inside the page? So you just drag the bar. Let me just drag it out. Sorry. So now it's outside the page. I just drag it inside, and it just usually it Figma automatically recognizes I'm trying to place this within the frame. But if it doesn't, all you need to do is you can select on the left panel. You can select this bar, this thing here, and then you can drag this to be within the Google Pixel, to be under the Google Pixel text. Yeah, great question. But if you're still confused, feel free to come right after the class to ask. We have to move on because we have a lot of activities. Thank you for the great question. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is auto layout. So remember in assignment 3 or assignment 2, where we had to create this asteroids header, where you have an asteroid floating on the left, the asteroid's text in the middle, and the asteroid image, another image floating on the right side. So if you watched the group office hours I did back in the days, and I recommended a way called using CSS Flexbox, how you can easily place 3 different things at 3 different parts of a container, right? CSS Flexbox, right? Cool. And auto layout in Figma is actually exactly like CSS Flexbox. So you can easily organize the position of multiple elements within a container. And that's pretty much what auto layout is. And again, it's great for responsive design because it can adjust correspondingly when its parent size changes. So let's now actually take a look at auto layout. So again, I'm going to go to the auto layouts page. So I'm going to change pages again. And as you can see here, OK, I should actually just get started. So how do I create an auto layout, right? How I would do it personally, other than using shortcuts, is I would first select the things I want to make it auto layout. So for example, if I want this checkbox and this piece of text to be an auto layout, or yeah, I would select them, right? And then I would right-click to open this context menu here. And I would click on Add Auto Layout right here. So you can use Shift-A if you're good at keyboard shortcuts. So you can see that after I have created this as an auto layout, quickly notice how this symbol on the left panel changed slightly. But if you didn't notice, that's fine. Just wanted to point that out. So after creating this as an auto layout, usually a good practice is to always rename this to something meaningful rather than frame 53. I'm going to name this item 1, just so that I know this is a to-do item. All right. So right now, item 1 is an auto layout. And you can see that by selecting item 1 together, on the right panel, the auto layout subsection pops up, indicating that this is an auto layout again. And here are some things you can adjust for auto layout, some simple features for you to explore more on your own. But the first feature you can adjust is the direction you want the auto layout to be in, right? Just like Flexbox, you can flex vertically, you can flex horizontally. And auto layout, you can also lay out vertically or lay out horizontally. So if I wanted to lay out vertically, I just click on vertical. As you can see, these 2 things are now stacked on top of each other, right? If I wanted to be horizontal, I just click on horizontal. Now it's going to be stacked right next to each other. All right. There's also this wrap feature that was recently introduced, I believe, sometime last year. And basically what it does is going to automatically wrap around the elements when the width changes. And yeah, feel free to play around with that as well. But right now, I'm just going to use this horizontal placement, horizontal layout. I'm going to make this constraint or the container a little bit bigger so I can show this feature here. So you can see this square thing on the right panel. you can specify where you want to position these two elements within the container. So suppose I want to place it at the top, I can just simply click this top left thing, and it's going to place it at the top. So I can also change it to center, right? I can move it around, no problem, right? So that's pretty much it about this feature right here. Just describes the placement of these two elements with respect to its parent. And the last feature I want to talk about is the margin, or padding. So you can adjust how much space between each element by using these three features here, so these three things. So I'm going to adjust this from 6 to, let's say, 16. You can see that the gap between the checkbox and the text has increased. All right. And that's pretty much it for the basic features about auto layout. And now your task is to use this auto layout feature to create a to-do list. And basically, each to-do item, just like what we did before, must be an auto layout. And after you create an auto layout for each item, you are actually going to organize these three things, these three auto layouts, into one huge auto layout like this. So yeah, but feel free to play around with it and see whether you can figure out how to place them into auto layout using the things we have learned so far.
How do I visualize the effect that is, for example, is helpful for responsiveness?
Yeah, so we haven't talked about the feature that make it super responsive right here, but there are definitely a way to make it super responsive. I think I can show it in a bit. Yeah, cool. Yeah, OK. Actually, let me, sorry, yes.
I understand we gotta go to the auto layout, like starter page.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like create the new element.
How about let me just show how we can do it? OK, sounds good. Sorry about that. OK, let me just actually get started. So make sure we finish everything on time. So let me just make this slightly. OK, so to answer Professor's question about how to make this a little more responsive, so you can actually change this text box here to be fill container. All right. So you can change this property to be fill container. And after doing so, you can see that I can adjust the width, and the text automatically wraps around to the next line. All right. So that's what fill container does, so that you can use it to make it slightly more responsive, I guess. But anyways, so how to place these three things into auto layout? So I have to make first of all make each of them an auto layout. So I'm just going to do it repetitively, slightly auto layout. So now all three of them are auto layout. Let me just make them go into the same center. All right. Now all three of them are auto layout. I can actually select all three of them and place them into a huge auto layout by just selecting all three and clicking on Add Auto Layout one more time. And now it's actually going to make this a huge auto layout. Let me just change something really quick. All right, cool. So now you can see that these three elements not only are themselves auto layouts, they can also be placed within another auto layout in the outer container, right? And you can see the distance between these three elements are roughly the same without you having to automatically adjust them, right? So that's basically the power of auto layout. And as you can see, you can place this into the Google Pixel frame. And now you just place this auto layout within another container. So that is pretty much it about auto layout. And we are going to move on to the next thing we are going to talk about. Let me just present, which is components. So you probably noticed that when I was doing the activity prior, I had to change each individual element to be auto layout, right? So I only had 3 elements back there, but imagine if I had 100 elements I wanted to change to auto layout, right? That would be very tedious, and I wouldn't want to do that myself. So how can we simplify this process and make it such that if we just change one element, all of the other elements change automatically, right? How can we do that? And the answer is using components. So Figma has this very powerful feature called components, where you can make an element you have created to be a component such that every instance of this component will automatically update if its parent component updates as well. All right. So it's great for consistency because all of the things that all of the instances of the component will look identical to the component as long as you don't change it, of course. And once you have created a component, there will be a parent component, and it's going to look like the symbol on the right corner here. It's going to have 4 diamond-shaped things stacked together. And it's going to have an instance, or the child component, that's going to inherit all of the properties of the parent component, all right? Which is pretty cool. So this, I like making analogies. I guess this, you can think of this as any kind of inheritance you have learned in any programming language, right? So let's take a look at components, actually. And I'm going to click on the component starter page, and I'm going to navigate to the components. So I'm actually going to use this button here as an example, and I'm going to make this a component, all right? How do you make a component, you might ask? Again, you select this element, and you right-click, and you can see create component. All right, so I'm going to create a component. And you have created a component, all right? And you can see after creating this as a component, the color actually changed slightly. So it's now purple, and also the icon on the left panel here also changed slightly as well. So these icons are just so that you can easily identify which element is which type of Figma element, pretty much. So you can create. So this is what we call the main component, or the parent component. And you can create an instance of a component by, I like to use keyboard shortcut for this one. I actually don't know how to do it with the normal context menu thing. But all you need to do is you use your left hand to press on the Alt key, or the Options key, I believe, on the MacBook. You press on the Alt key, all right? And you are going to hover over this component right here, all right? You can see the mouse changed slightly, and I'm going to drag an instance out from this parent. And you have created an instance. So that's how you create instances from a main component, all right? And like I said, the greatest thing about component is that whenever you make an update to the parent, it will automatically propagate to the child. So for example, I want to change the parent to a different color. Say I don't want it to be blue. Let me just unlink that. I don't want it to be blue anymore. I want it to be, let's say, pink, all right? And as you can see, as soon as I clicked on pink, the child automatically picked up the update and changed to pink as well, all right? And in fact, all of the child will pick up this update as long as you don't override certain properties. So talking about overriding, we can also change the properties of the child such that each child can be slightly different without making this change to the parent. So for example, if I want this child, the plus button, or the plus thing in the middle, to be the color black, I can change this to the color black. And you can see after I changed it, the parent did not update. So you can have each instance to be slightly different from the parent but without too much change. And Figma actually limits the things you can change in the instance when you're trying to change them. All right. So I'm just going to place this instance to this frame here. And another thing I want to point out is that from my understanding, the best practice in Figma is that you don't use your main component in any of the top-level frames. You should only use the instances that you have created, such that you can easily find your main component, and you can update it such that all of the instances will pick up this update. All right. One last thing I want to talk about component is that if you remember that at the beginning I talked about this assets tab that I tried to skip over, and you can actually check out the assets tab right now. And basically what the assets tab is, it will actually contain all of the components you have created in this design file. So my current page is called component starter. And if I click on this component starter, I can see that this component is being registered as an asset in the assets panel. All right. And I can, in fact, just drag this component out to create an instance, which is very easy. So that's basically how you can create a component, how you can create instances, and how you use these instances in your frames. All right? Cool. So now we're actually going to do another activity using components. So we have created a component, basically the button thing, and we have put it in the top right, bottom right corner of the frame. And now your task is to basically do the third task, make an item component, and then create 3 instances, each of them with slightly different texts, and try to apply the auto layout if you have time. But if you don't, that's perfectly fine. Just create an item component, create 3 instances of this item, and try to change the text for each item so that they are slightly different. All right, cool. Let's feel free to work on it right now. Yeah, feel free to stop as soon as you have just created 3 instances of the component. You don't have to apply the auto layout. I think it might be too much work. All right, let me just get started one more time to show you how you can create another instance. So now you can see that, let me just delete this. Sorry. I have created, so right now this item thing is not yet a component. So how do I create a component? Again, you right click and you say create component. So now you have created one component, right? To create an instance, you just simply, again, hold down the Alt key or the Options key. You drag it out. That will be an instance. Let me just change this back so you can see. And you can change the text of this instance by simply just selecting the text and type in, let's say, eat. All right, so that's basically how you can, again, create an instance from a component. And you can actually create many instances. For example, you can see how right now, this instance says eat in the text. But when I create another instance, right? Sorry. It's going to say items placeholder one more time. Because again, when you change certain properties of an instance, it does not actually change the parent properties. All right? I will skip how to make them auto layout again because it would just be the same as last time. But ideally, you would have 3 elements, 3 instances created, and make them in an auto layout and place them back to the Google Pixel frame so that it will connect smoothly to the next thing we're going to talk about, which is prototyping. Oh, sorry.
So if you create an instance of it that change that child instance,
Yeah.
then is that also a component that you can make more instances out of?
Yes, yeah. They won't necessarily have like this hierarchical structure, but by doing like the same thing as what we did before by holding that Alt key and trying to drag something out of it, it will just create a copy of that instance rather than a child of that instance. Yeah. But feel free to play around with it if you have more questions. But great question. Yes. Yeah, so how do I make another copy? So let's say there's an instance, right? Let me just change this so that it doesn't, let's say, sleep. Right, cool. Again, I just hold down my Alt key or Options key on the MacBook, and then I just drag and just create an instance. But sorry, that's a term. Yeah. OK, cool. All right, let's jump into prototyping. So everything we talked about so far involves building the design part of Figma. So more importantly, how does my design look? But now we're going to shift our attention to how does my design actually work by defining the interactions that you have seen at the beginning in all of those demos, how you can navigate from frames to frames. You can have little animations around. So how do you do that, actually? We use Figma's most powerful feature called prototyping. And basically, you can define, using the base prototyping feature, you can define how to navigate from one frame to another frame. And this feature is actually kind of similar to, let's say, JavaScript's event handling feature. So once the user performs certain actions on your prototype, it's going to trigger an action that leads to somewhere else. All right. Let's actually take a look at how prototyping works. So if you click on the prototyping starter page, and I have clicked on it, so I'm going to close that, you'll be presented with these 2 frames. And our goal here is, say, when I click on this plus button on the bottom right corner of the first frame, it's going to redirect me to the second frame to create an effect of how, once I click on this button, I just created 3 to-do things just for a demo. Right? So how can I do that? Oh, sorry. I apologize. So this frame, I accidentally locked it before publishing the community file. So make sure you unlock it so you can edit individual elements on this frame. So you unlock a frame by clicking on this lock thing in the left panel. Just click it once, it will unlock. All right. And prototyping is actually very easy. So the first thing you want to do is go to the right panel, right? And you click on the prototype tab, right? And all you need to do right now is just to, whenever you hover over any element on the frame, it's going to show these buttons plus things on them. And these plus things are basically interactions that you can define. So for example, if I want to define the interaction of clicking on this button takes me to a second page, I just create an interaction by double-clicking the plus button that just showed up and drag this arrow to the frame I want to redirect to when certain action happens. Yes?
Sorry, you said unlock both of them, like both of the ones on the left-hand side?
Yes, both of them. Thank you. Great question. Yeah. So you click on it and drag it to the second frame. That will define an interaction or a flow from the first frame to the second frame. All right. And then after you do that, you can see this small context menu shows up. You can change the event that you are listening for. So right now, it's just listening for an on-click event. You can change it to different things, but I'm just going to listen for an on-click event. All right. Once the user clicks on it, I'm going to navigate to, you can actually see, click on it, you can see the drop-down menu. You have more options, but I'm going to talk about them in a bit. Right now, let's just use navigate to. You're going to navigate to the second frame which is the Google Pixel 2 frame here. And then you can also specify which type of transition you want. And right now, it's specified to be instant, which is OK. But let's see. So one of the great things about Figma is that it has this something called Smart Animate feature. And by clicking on it, Figma will actually pick a really nice animation for you when you navigate, when this event happens. So I'm just going to use this Smart Animate feature. And feel free to play around with it and see what you can make from this Smart Animate feature, but it's pretty powerful. And now you have defined this interaction. Let's actually present it. So again, how you can present is click on the top right button here, which says present, and you will be redirected to this page right here, where it says present. All right. So now you can see that this kind of looks like what we had at the very beginning. Some of the demos had this kind of thing where, yeah, but anyways. So again, to see what are some interactable elements on your current frame, you can click anywhere on your frame. And you can see this button here lights up. Let me just click a couple more times. You can see that it's lighting up. And I'm going to click on it. And you can see these three things showed up. Right, let me just go back and show it one more time. I click on this button, and these three things showed up. Right, pretty cool, pretty cool. So now, and that's actually pretty much it for prototyping. Feel free to play around with it a bit more, exploring different transition types and events. Yes? Sorry?
You show again how you added the flip listener, or like, how did you get that dialogue?
For sure, yeah. Let me just delete this. So first thing you want to do is on the right panel, click on the prototype tab. All right. Once you have clicked this, everything you hover over is going to have these little plus buttons. And you're going to drag this plus button out and redirect to a frame. And that's how you do it. Yeah, cool. Awesome, great question. So now your task is to simply use this feature. And we already have like this interaction here, so clicking on this button leads to the second frame. Now your task is to make another interaction that on the second frame, clicking on this bottom right triangle button here will take the user back to the first frame using everything we just learned so far. All right, feel free to start whenever you're ready. Yeah. All right, hopefully you have finished, because that was, I believe, the most easy task out of all of the activities we've done today. Basically, all you need to do is, again, just select the prototype tab first. And let me teach you a trick. So you can see it's actually kind of hard to select this triangle here. The first thing it defaults to is actually the outer container. So what you can do is that you can, again, use your left hand, or sorry, use your other hand, hold down the control key, or maybe the command key on the Mac. I'm not sure, actually. So if you're on Windows, hold down the control key. And you can see, as soon as you press on the control key, the mouse instantly recognized this element, right? So you can see, I think I broke it. But you can see it instantly recognized it. And then you can just click on it. I just messed up, sorry. Click on it and drag this interaction to the first frame and change them correspondingly. I'm not going to show how to change them because it's basically the same thing. But that's how you create a very basic interaction for your Figma prototype. Does anyone have any questions? Great, awesome, cool. And now, so we talked about, so everything we've talked so far can already take you very far by just using these features. You can actually build really, really nice Figma prototypes if you use all of them to its full potential. But the following two features that I'm going to talk about are some more advanced features that are recently introduced. around 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that really level up your interactivity even more. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is called variants. So we talked about components, but as you create more and more components in your Figma prototype, you can notice that most of the components, or at least some of the components, look very similar with only slight differences, right? So what if you want to logically group these components together such that you can easily find them or access them or whatever, right? So everything is about logically grouping things together so you can, for the ease of creation. And Figma actually provided something called variants. And basically what variants are, they are just simply components that are very similar to each other with only slight differences. All right? But each of them are distinct top-level parent components. You can group them together into something called a component set. All right? Basically, your set will contain different variants of this component. And you can define different properties and states for each variant. I won't talk more about variants here because variants is actually one of the more advanced topics. It has a lot of things to discuss. So feel free to read this very nicely written article here by Figma and see what are some of the possibilities of using variants. All right. One of the most important possibility of using variants is that you can create something called interactive components. All right. So before, we used the prototyping feature to take the user from one frame to another frame. And that's, in fact, the only possibility that Figma provides with its prototyping feature without using interactive components. So that is OK. It can already take you very far, of course. But it might be slightly redundant when you try to create something like this thing right here. So this thing is just a heart shape that once the user clicks on it, it changes to red, and the piece of text displays saying added to favorites. All right. If you want to create this very minor, detailed looking thing here, using everything we've learned so far, you will have one frame with a heart shape, nothing in it, another frame with a heart shape, and within it will be filled with red color, and the third frame, which has the red color and a text display on top of it. So you can see that you have many redundant frames by using the feature we just learned so far. Right? And in fact, suppose you actually want to place this feature on every frame in your prototype. Right? You will have, let's say, if you only have, let's say, 50 frames, by placing this thing on every single frame, you will need 3 times 50, which is 150 frames. All right? That's a lot of redundant frames. So how can we not use that many frames and create the same effect? Right? And luckily, Figma actually provided this functionality called interactive prototypes. Sorry, interactive components. So rather than creating an interaction between a frame and another frame, you create an interaction between one component and another component in a component set, or more specifically, a variant, between variants. All right? And this successfully reduces the number of frames you need to use. And also, they're great for creating micro interactions. So basically, micro interactions are these type of interactions that are pretty minor and subtle, but they significantly improves the user experience overall. Right? Some other example would be clicking on a button and the button changes color, indicating that it is currently being pressed. Another example might be you have a loading progress bar indicating how much progress the system has done so far. All of them are examples of micro interactions. And you will be implementing a very simple micro interaction of your choice in assignment 4 as well. So, OK, so sorry, I showed this prematurely, but let me just show you how you can create an interactive component in Figma. So I'm going to, again, click on this variants starter page. And I'm going to use this button here as an example, this button right here. All right. So you can see right now this button is already a component. Right? So remember, you can only create an interactive component by creating a component set with different variants and defining interactions between the variants. All right. So I'm going to select this button. Again, always select first. Right-click. Again, always right-click. And then I can see that when I hover over this main component row in the context menu, I can click on add variant. All right, so this is the first step in creating an interactive component. All right, cool. So now I have created a variant of the component. And now these two things are being placed, again, I know I'm being a little repetitive, but they are being placed into something called a component set. All right. So now, let me just actually change this second variant here into a different color. So let's say I want to change this to pink. All right. So my second variant is now pink. And now let's say I want an interaction such that when the user hovers over this plus button, it's going to change to the pink color. So again, now I'm going to define an interaction between these two variants by, again, going to the prototype tab. And now you can see these small add buttons are showing up. Click on it and drag it to this component here, to the variant. And as you can see, once I drag that interaction to this variant, this context menu showed up again. And I can change this to be, yeah, same thing. But one thing I want to point out is that if you remember from before, this menu did not have the opportunity of change to. So this transition called change to is only available when you're creating interactive components. All right? So it's basically indicating I'm changing from this one variant to another variant. All right? So you can see property one, don't ignore that for now. And I'm just saying change this variant, first variant, to variant 2. It's bad naming, I apologize, but yeah, just changing it to variant 2. And I'm using Smart Animate because it looks nice. And now I'm going to present by hitting the present button. Let me just close this. Give me 1 second, sorry. I think I messed something up. I apologize. Sorry. Instead of saying on click, I need to change this to hover while hovering. Sorry about that. And pretty much the reason why, OK, I'll explain the reason after class, but just use while hovering for now. But as you can see, once I hover over this element, it changes from the purple color to this pink color. Right? You can see once I move away, it changes back again. All right, pretty cool. So that's pretty much it. So that's actually not too much it about interactive components, but they cover pretty much the basics of what interactive components are like. Originally, I had this plan of working on this second interactive component where you use this placeholder thing and change it to like cross it out. But I don't know if we have enough time to demonstrate that. And I want to just talk about one last thing that I think might be useful for your project. And this, feel free to work on the activity by yourself and just try to change the component from to an interactive component such that once the user clicks on it, it changes to crossed out. All right. But one last thing I want to talk about is that Figma actually introduced this feature very recently, I believe, either in last year or in 22. But we talked about how, at the beginning, we don't necessarily need to implement every single feature in a high-fidelity prototype. So for example, one feature that you might not want to implement would be an interactive keyboard, because interactive keyboards are actually extremely difficult to implement, or pretty much impossible to implement, using everything we have learned up so far. But luckily, I guess, Figma actually heard the community's voices and people have been saying they want to build something like an interactive keyboard. And they introduced them something called variables. All right. Variables, like its name suggests, it's something that can hold a value, and it can something that is also be able to change its value when something happens. Right? That's what a variable is. And let me just show you what variables allow you to do using the very last demo in the prototype. But I just want to say that you might not be able to edit it on your current plan if you just registered a Figma account, because this feature is only available for education account. But education account, you can actually apply for free without entering any credit card information by just simply using your UMich email. All right. So feel free to register for an educational account so you can use some of the most powerful features of Figma called variables. And one last thing I want to say about variable is that variables are actually currently in open beta, so it might be buggy sometimes. So yeah, that's pretty much it, everything I want to talk about. So to create a variable, you must first unselect everything. All right, just click on anywhere on the page that you're not selecting anything. And you're going to, once you are not clicking on anything, the red panel here will show these very simple stuff. And you can click on something called local variables. All right, oh, sorry, I forgot that you might not be able to click on it unless you have an education account. But I'm clicking on it called local variables. All right, let me actually just delete this variable so I can show it. So once you click on local variables, it's going to open this pop over. And I can say I want to create a variable, let's say of type string. And I call this input text with the value of anything, let's say input. All right. OK. So now I have created a variable. And now, let me just close this. The purpose of my Figma prototype right now is that I want to build an interactive prototype, such that an interactive keyboard, such that whenever the user clicks on any of the keys on the keyboard, this input field here is going to change accordingly, right? So how do you do that? You actually need to first create a variable of string type, and then you're going to select this text here and attach this to the variable we just created. All right. There are many articles, or there's an official Figma documentation on how you can attach variables. But right now, I'm just going to say attach this variable by clicking on this button right here called apply variable. All right. And as you can see, I have created this variable called input text, and I'm going to attach it. And you can see that as soon as I have attached this variable to this input, it actually changed to, sorry, let me just actually change this a bit. It currently has a string, which is weird. Let me just unchange this. All right, cool. Now it's back. You can see that as soon as I attach this variable to this text box, the text box has changed from its original value to this updated variable value. And that's the power of variables, because anything that you attach a variable into will automatically pick up the update when this variable changes. So right now, let's say I want to build this interactive keyboard now, such that when the user clicks on the button Q, this input here is going to change to Q. And the more Q I press, the more Q is going to appear on this input box. Right? So how can I do that? So again, I'm going to use the prototype feature here. I'm going to create an interaction. And now I'm going to create an interaction by actually, rather than using the plus marks here, I'm actually going to use this plus mark on the right panel, just so it's easier to use. Clicking on the plus mark is actually going to open this. I'm going to say onClick, which is good. And now, let me direct your attention to these two interactions, set variable and conditional. So again, these two things are exclusive to variables. And they are also exclusive when you have an education plan, which is free as well if you're a student. I'm going to use this conditional here to show you what I'm going to do. And this conditional is simply just like an if-else statement in any programming language. I'm just going to say when the input text is equal to input, I'm going to set this variable to Q. All right. Sorry. Oh, wait, sorry. I think I just already added. OK, yeah, it's already setting to the Q. Sorry. And otherwise, if it's not this default value I have created, I'm just going to simply set variable and append to this existing variable by just doing this equals this plus Q. All right. So it might not look anything exciting right now,